Professor Haystacks here. Let us take the time now to consider Truth is Stranger Than Fanfiction, or I think it's just called Stranger Than Fanfiction. Already from the title, we can tell it's going to be taking a look at various types of fandoms in some way. We see no actual fanfiction in here except for a mention at the very end. Let's skip ahead to the convention. Now, the convention floor we see, for those of you who have been to one, is a fairly common layout. It is thus pretty accurate, although I've never seen a convention with a giant fake temple set up. I have seen ones where there's sword fighting rings and such, and once there was one with some kind of full-size castle playset or something. Now here we have a body pillow. They have some name in Japanese, but featuring usually female characters. You occasionally see some male ones for the ladies. And often in enticing or sometimes even compromising positions. I had someone say that the non-bound pillow actually has something of a come hither look, that you would expect there to be something naughtier on the other side, but we see later there actually isn't. But this pillow with Daring Do tied up has been the source of much talk. Alright, so in this sequence, we see Quibblepants and Rainbow Dash acting as con buddies, people that are friends and basically only meet up at cons, usually due to being geographically distant. That's a thing that happens a lot.
I'm not saying those books don't exist. I'm saying that I refuse to acknowledge them.
Why?
Because they're horrible! I mean, there isn't a single thing after Ring of Destiny that is even remotely in the realm of the possible!
What? I know for a fact that everything in every one of those books is 100% possible!
And how could you possibly know that?
Now, we get into problems that can arise and debates. Sometimes they're pretty convivial, but Quibblepants here does not seem to want to go that direction. We have fans of the first 3 seasons or of the original Star Wars trilogy. Either one could be a target here. The first season was seen by many as mocking My Little Pony and similar shows from the 80s that were toy-retic and not much else, to borrow a term from HomestarRunner.com. Rainbow Dash arguing that Daring Do's exploits are plausible is reminiscent of one of the chapter books, Rainbow Dash and the Daring Do Double Dare. So it's a plot that has been explored before, and in there was much the same thing. And here, in that one, she offered to perform the feats herself. Anyway, what we have here is something called Than Fanfiction. He notes that it being action-heavy. I've heard people say that Season 4 in particular was rather action-heavy. I've seen some try to say that it's more action-heavy ever since Season 3, but I don't know that I agree with that statement. I'd have to do a detailed analysis, and we don't have time for that right now. Moving along, let's show this quick clip here.
Does a pony who only likes your first trilogy qualify as suspicious? Just checking.
Alright, first I'd like to note that Rainbow Dash sees almost everything as an emergency. She can be a bigger drama queen than Rarity sometimes. Also, it's worth noting that it's possible that A.K. Yearling, a.k.a. Daring Do, spent less time writing the later books as her adventures kicked off into full swing. This is merely speculation, however. We see here she's pulling off what I'm going to call a Spider-Man gambit for a couple of times, most notably in, I want to say, the 2000s movie, where Spider-Man pretended he was a guy dressing up as Spider-Man, because everyone knows Spider-Man doesn't take elevators. Now, here we have a quick shot on this still. That we have what appear to be 2 of the covers of the actual Daring Do books. For some reason, 2 of the covers are repeated here. There's 3 real Daring Do books that are available for purchase from your local bookstore or website of choice. just so I give the company the free advertising here. In their arguments, we see here that, I'm just going to freeze on the one frame here, Rainbow Dash tail slaps him. This points to something other people have noted, that they seem to be able to do quite a lot with their tails and manes. Pinkie Pie in a special, but we see it in other places as well. Fluttershy has occasionally used her mane in ways that it really shouldn't be able to move. We also see briefly here the Ranma pony that Fluttershy had suspended in one of the Halloween episodes. This would imply that this booth is selling Fluttershy's art. Either she herself is there, although I feel like they would have shown her if it was, or it's someone selling her art for her. Since Fluttershy is allegedly shy, although they've been moving away from that, it makes some sense that she might commission someone else to sell her wares for her. Now, Rainbow Dash mentions at one point, let's just take a look,
By a 60-story drop from the top of a waterfall after sustaining a broken wing in a Category 6 rapid.
Obviously, her wing wasn't broken.
that obviously Daring Do's wing was not actually broken. So what did she write that it was broken and exaggerate in the book, or did she lie in the book and it wasn't really broken? We don't know. This is an intriguing thing, but we're not told anything more about it. It would be nice to know more.
I do not know what Daring Do is playing at, but if she told you to fan ponies of my plan to steal the amulet, you must work for her.
Now, we see here that the armband to get back into the con falls off. Always a disaster when you're going to conventions. But also, Rainbow Dash apparently forgets she can fly. None of her opponents can. She could have probably... We see her carrying Rarity in an earlier episode, so she could presumably just grab Quibble Pants and jet out of there. But she doesn't think about it until he's caught, and at that point she really can't go flying off because she wouldn't want to leave him behind. Either way, I feel like it's a bit of an oversight on her part. We see that the fight symbols used in Batman, like biff, boom, pow, and then there's like exclamation marks and hash marks and stuff, is the cutie mark of one of Owie Zoodle's henchmen. So apparently he was born to be a tough, or cutie mark to be a tough.
It doesn't matter. We'll never stop the Griffin's luck before they get back.
Now, this quote-unquote puzzle lock is a pretty standard rotating lock. I don't know that there's actually a way to crack them. Presumably this one has some sort of puzzle that the solution gives you the way to unlock it. But it's not some mystical lock. It's fairly standard.
What was that?
Daring Do, thank goodness, we're over here.
Fan out! You can't let Daring Do rescue these two!
Now in that clip, we see all the guards running after a distraction stone, which, as Quibble Pants points out, is random and stupid. I would argue, in this case, by drawing attention to it, they're attempting to make it a parody of tropes that he is complaining about. That's got 2 or 3 levels of meta-narrative in there.
Which would make Daring Do left hoof, which we know is false, and that is everything that's wrong with Daring Do and the trek to the terrifying tower.
Here, Quibble Pants marks that the hoofedness of Daring Do changes in the books. Most likely, it's just that A.K. Yearling can't keep track of which hand. You think since she's using her own, she would. The other possibility is that she's actually ambidextrous. Some ambidextrous people will use primarily one hand for some tasks, but then switch for others. That may be what's going on. Alright, so in this daring rescue scene, Rainbow Dash basically skips Quibble Pants like a stone. Could she not have just grabbed him like she grabbed Rarity in Sonic Rainbow? It seems odd.
To the lost temple of Chico Master!
Alright, a couple things to note in that quick series of clips. First is that they tied Rainbow Dash's wing up, but the ties were elsewhere on Quibble Pants. Makes a certain degree of sense. The next is that there's always something behind a waterfall in video games. Here it's actually beside it, but the same principle applies. Here, on this still, we see an alicorn facing a serpent. I'm wondering if maybe that's Celestia or Luna fighting Discord. Possible, unknown. These temples could well be from about 1,000 years ago. Hard to say.
Oh, finally. Look, each door has another door that matches. These two both have earth ponies fighting serpents. These two have Pegasi fighting griffins. These two have unicorns fighting bears. But this one
Has an alicorn on it. It's the only one without a match. How did I miss that?
I've been asking myself that ever since book 4.
Now here, Daring Do somehow misses a very obvious puzzle. Any video game player would have probably spotted that in about 5 seconds. And she does berate herself for it. But in this panel, we see the alicorn alone and the serpent on a different panel. So maybe it's not Discord, but interesting thought. Here, in this still, we see another set piece. That is the turning wall. I've just took out a still so we don't take up too much time. We do have limited time here.
7 doors, 7 locks. One of them leads to the treasure. I'd rather not think about what the others lead to.
Yeah, the classic pony and the tiger bit.
All right, so there we hear a reference to the pony and the tiger in this beginning of this puzzle. It's, of course, the lady and the tiger. Really isn't the lady and the tiger, except in the sense that there's a good door and a bad door. It doesn't present the moral conflict or leaving the option to the reader's imagination that the lady and the tiger does. Let's take a look at this clip.
Seriously, do you ever not escape out of the top of a temple?
Here I would like to note that if you have wings and can fly, the logical route of escape from a temple which has a skylight is through said skylight. That's why any adventure in a temple is bound to end with Daring Do leaving through the roof, because when you can fly, up is usually the best direction to go because most of your enemies cannot fly.
Okay, I got it. Let's create a fake treasure out of mud and rocks, give that to Caballeron, and then when...
Not every Daring Do plan has to be super complicated.
Ah! I swear I heard them!
Okay, so here we have a couple of different bits. We have the fake treasure, standard in a lot of adventure things and similar to Indiana Jones. I don't think Indy himself used it in the canon movies, but anyway. We also have calling the monster in to deal with the bad guys, seen in, for instance, Peter Pan. And we have the reed snorkel, yet another set piece common in a lot of things.
Before we get in another fight, I think I finally figured it out. I love the Daring Do that solves puzzles and uses her brain to get out of tough situations, and she did way more of that in the original trilogy. You love the Daring Do that is brave and awesome and comes out on top no matter what the odds.
Okay, so apparently there's more intellectual problem solving in the first 3 books. And why does that trail off? Does Daring Do get dumber, or do her enemies, or does her writing slip, or possibly she just gets so good physically she doesn't actually need to puzzle her way through stuff and can just power through everything? Most problems can be solved by hitting them repeatedly with rocks. I've learned this from various board games as well as a number of video games. Hit something enough times, it'll usually solve the problem. Not necessarily a great lesson, but, you know.
Do you think A.K. Yearling would consider letting me write the next book? Yeah, I think I can make things way clearer. I mean, for instance, in the second adventure, there's a side character. I don't want to kind of name it right now because it's sort of this thing that I've already written a lot of fan fiction on. I don't want, not that I'm saying that you would steal it, but I am saying that this would totally go along my whole thing about puzzle solving, except what if each puzzle that was solved unlocked a new karate move? Think of it that way, right? I mean, I'm kind of a year late myself, so I'm sure she'd be open to...
Quibble?
Sorry?
Now, this is the long ending bit, which is a fan thing, where he goes and talks about fan fiction ideas and pointing out minor characters. Thing about stealing ideas, basically writers for the series generally avoid reading fan fiction for legal reasons, because if something similar popped up later, there could conceivably be a court case and it could be trouble. So they generally just avoid it. This is also why studios do not read unsolicited scripts. They just chuck them in the garbage. So don't do that. I don't know about Hasbro specifically, but I've heard definitely that NBC does. And Disney does, and they will occasionally make a deal out of it if they start getting a lot of unsolicited scripts at some point. But his idea, to look at that, is puzzle solving, unlocking karate moves. That's a video game trope, I suppose, but it doesn't really fit in with Daring Do's world. Unless they had some sort of intersect, like in Chuck, that wouldn't make any sense. I don't know that he thought that one out completely. I suppose it could be some kind of crossover. Alright, now I'm going to do this with a number of stills. First, back to this bit here where he tells them to go around the gator instead of over it, and they mishear them. Apparently there was a bit like that in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I had someone point that out to me. Shout out. Hey. I haven't seen it in such a long time myself. I don't actually remember that. I do remember this next one, where there is a rope bridge in the Temple of Doom and numerous other things. There's always a rope bridge. I haven't researched this one. I might at some point and work it in with some other stuff, but why rope bridge is there? Best guess is it's possible to work that up without having to have someone on the other side of the bridge. They did a bit like this in Doctor Who at one point. You have one person get across one way, either using a downed log or throw one rope across and get it to catch on something, and have one person shimmy across the rope, whoever's the best at that. Then they throw another rope back, and now you string a bridge between the two ropes, and that's how you get a rope bridge. And it's made with wood planks because there's wood readily available that you can, in theory, chop up. Not something easily done with a small group. An army could do that, or a survey corps, someone that was prepared to do that sort of thing. Now, last but not least, I want to show a couple of clips here that illustrate one of my favorite little fan theories.
We'll have to do introductions later. What about you? I've got to get this to a museum. Thanks for your help. I couldn't have done it without you.
Okay, now what we see here is numerous examples of Pegasi, I believe 3 for this episode, Pegasi using wings as most people would use hands. I believe we see it twice from Daring Do and once from Rainbow Dash. Just a reminder that all I see is an abstract painting. I add the clips later, so I may occasionally forget details if I didn't write them in my notes. Kind of leaves Earth ponies out in the dust, but it gives Pegasi a way of writing semi-neatly without having to hold a pen in their mouths, as Earth ponies seem to. Unicorns can, of course, use magic for fine-tuned control. The Pegasi's wings seem very adept at a number of things, or at hand-like motions. One might imagine that this arose as an adaptation the way humans evolved hands, although it does draw the question of why the Earth ponies can't do anything particularly similar. It may be that the 3 races emerged in tandem, so that evolutionarily speaking, they never really needed to. Anything that required prehensile abilities, unicorns or Pegasi would take care of. This usefulness of wings would not come into play much while flying, since they need the wings for flying, but it does seem to come in handy for adventuring when you need extra limbs. It effectively means they have, in addition to their forehooves, their wings in order to grasp stuff or move objects with. I would say their wing grip strength is probably not very high, so it would mostly be useful for manipulating objects. But it is a nice little thing to note there. I will point out one last thing, and that is that Star Wars and Indiana Jones were also based on old movie serials. In the case of Star Wars, it was a mix of Flash Gordon and samurai films. Samurai films not necessarily serials, but same principle. Indiana Jones was based on old Western and adventure serials, which would feature things like that. You could see The Phantom or Dick Tracy, or even to some extent Batman and Superman serials would follow arcs not entirely dissimilar from that. And so that's what we see on here. The original Star Wars trilogy, for instance, and the original Indiana Jones trilogy were what Quibble Pants talks about in the beginning. In a lot of ways were a send-up of old serials that poked gentle fun at them without being too serious about themselves. That takes care of my literary analysis and my wings equals hands bit, so I will close here. Good night, and drive safely.